Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate everybody who came out. I know 30 minutes of your time is a really large ask, especially like physically coming here and not Skyping in. And if you Skyped in, thank you. But I was really afraid as we talking to an empty room. So thank you so much for everybody coming. It means a lot to me, and I appreciate you wanting to hear what I have to say about resilience. And in case you don't know who I am, my name's Lauren Tubsing, and I joined GE almost 4 years ago. I came here 4 years ago in August, and I came in our military side of the house. I was everybody's favorite person. I was an internal auditor, so everybody loved getting emails from me. And I'm currently in our compliance area, and this space has been a really good transition for me because prior to GE, I was an Air Force finance officer. I met my stud muffin of a husband at the Air Force Academy, and we got lucky enough to be stationed at Great Falls, Montana, Malmstrom Air Force Base together. And Montana has a special place in my heart because that's where Chris and I went from dating to being engaged to getting married and to having our first son, Brody. But the Air Force doesn't let you stay in one place for very long, and they decided that since we loved Montana and the slow life so much, they're going to send us to LA because that makes sense. So we got orders to LA Air Force Base, and I think when you're starting your whole family, you have this picture of what your family is going to be and what life's going to be like, a white picket fence with 2.5 kids and a dog. And Chris and I definitely had that vision, but in March of 2014, all of that changed. We had our second child, Adley Jo, or AJ. She's adorable. And she was born in March 2014, and then in April 2014, Miller Children's Hospital called us and said that AJ failed her newborn screening and she had an uncured terminal disease. And I think when you hear those words, this picture of this life that you think you're going to have, it changes. And so Chris and I sat down and we talked, and the military no longer seemed like a good fit for us. We wanted AJ to have continuity of care. We wanted her to have the same doctors, for her whole life. And just moving every 4 years wasn't really conducive to what we wanted for her. So we went from being 2 captains in the Air Force making stable income to 2 captains with separation paperwork, changing and getting out of the military. And we sat down and said, okay, where are we going to go? We're going to go wherever we think is best for her. And Cincinnati Children's is one of the best, if not the best, cystic fibrosis care center in the nation. I'm from Cincinnati originally, so Chris got his life dream to come back and live in Ohio. He didn't know it, that's where he wanted to be. So we got out of the Air Force, had no jobs lined up, just had our separation papers and drove cross country from LA to Cincinnati. GE Aviation was where I really wanted to work. My father worked here for a little bit. My grandmother retired from GE, and we got out of the Air Force like a little premature. We thought that one of us was going to retire from the Air Force. We thought it was going to at least be a large part of our life for a bit longer. So being able to come in on the MSO side and still be connected to the Air Force was really special to me, and I was really grateful for that opportunity. And over the past 4 years, I've learned a lot. And I've learned a lot about cystic fibrosis specifically. And so what is it, right? It's an uncured terminal disease, and it's autorecessional disease that really affects your respiratory tract and your digestive system. And what does that mean? That means that Chris and I are both carriers, which we had no idea that we were both carriers. And in fact, 1 in 31 Americans is actually a carrier of the CF gene. And all it takes is for 2 carriers to meet each other and to fall in love and to make some babies, and you have a 25% chance of your child also having that disease. And we're kind of beating the odds because in January of 2017, we had another child, Carson Rose, and she also has CF. So you know how you get it, what is it? And I'm not a doctor, so I kind of have to dump some things down. So essentially it's mucus. And I had to think of it like highway and like traffic. And I'm going to talk about mucus and some poop, and I'm going to talk about blood. So if any of that makes you guys nervous, I'm really sorry. It's just our life. And if you're a parent, you're very much used to the poop talk. So I have to think of mucus in kind of a dumbed down way. But for people who do not have CF, the mucus in our bodies, it's like you're on a backcountry road. It's free flowing, everything's great. Maybe you get sick every once in a while and you're at a stoplight, but then you get better and you keep going, and it's really easy. People who have CF, the mucus in their body, it's like you're in Atlanta or in LA and you're in rush hour traffic. Like it's thick, it's thick, it's stagnant, and it's congested. And really, that creates an environment that is a breeding ground for bacteria. So those of us who don't have CF, when we get sick, the bacteria gets out of our body pretty quickly. But those who have CF, that bacteria kind of gets stuck there, and it causes an infection. And that infection over time starts to scar your lungs. So CF is not this real big, you're in the hospital and you're deathly ill. It's pneumonia after bronchitis, and it slowly starts to damage your lungs until eventually it causes respiratory failure and decreases your capability to breathe. So it's not cured. It slowly decreases your capability to breathe. So what do you do when you don't have a cure? Again, I have to make things kind of non-doctor speak for me. I think of it like a race, right? Cystic fibrosis left on its own, it wants to be the hare and the tortoise in the hare. It wants to get to the finish line really fast. So we're very lucky that we have tools in our toolkit to try and slow that disease progression down and make it more like the tortoise. And you can see that the life expectancy has gotten a lot better over the last 10 years, and that's because some of these tools in our toolkit have gotten better. And the largest tool that we have in our toolkit is called something called the vest. And it literally is a vest that our girls put on every single day, and it starts to shake them. It literally shakes the snot out of them. And please excuse my Houday pants that I was wearing there. So what this does is this vest inflates with air, and it literally beats their chest. And it's trying to shake and to mobilize that thick, sticky mucus. So our girls do this twice a day, every day, 365 days a year. Birthdays, Christmas, you name it, they do this. And they're also inhaling medication. And what that medication's doing is it's trying to thin that mucus. So you're trying to make LA look more like a back Georgia road, and then you're trying to shake it out of them. And I wish I could say that that's all that we had to do, because I feel like that's a lot sometimes. But did you guys know there's mucus like everywhere in your body? Like I have learned so much about mucus. So there is mucus everywhere in your body, and unfortunately that means that there's other things the girls have to do as well. So in the morning, our girls put their vest on, it shakes them, they do their treatment, but they also have to take some other medication. So I mentioned earlier that CF is also a digestive disease, and I did not know this, but mucus is what moves your stool through your intestines. So if you've got thick, sticky mucus, it's hard to move the stool. So some people who have CF, and AJ specifically, suffer from some severe chronic constipation. So every morning, AJ takes some Miralax to try and help that. She takes Kalydeco, which is a pioneer drug in and of its type, because it actually tries to fix her genetic mutation. I bet you guys knew you had mucus in your nose, so that one I knew. So the boogie spray kind of helps to keep all of that thin and all that clear. And then our baby Carson Rose also takes Singular to deal with some upper respiratory inflammation. So this is every morning before we can go to church, before we can go to school, before they can go outside and play. The girls have to do this type of medication. And then if you were to see them out, you would have no idea that they have this. They look like really healthy, normal, I think very beautiful little girls. But then at night, we come back and the girls have to do it again. They have to put their vest on, they have to do treatment again, they inhale different medications. AJ takes some more Miralax. She takes a laxative of a different type to try and keep all of that going. More boogie mist, and you can see there that purple and pink pill, that's an acid reflux medication. Around the age of 3, a lot of people who have CF start to develop acid reflux. So AJ was definitely on that progression, so that was added. And you can see there's some vitamins on there, and that might seem kind of silly because a lot of kids take vitamins, but 80 to 90% of people who have cystic fibrosis have something called pancreatic insufficiency. And we're very lucky that right now our girls do not have that. But what it is mucus gets into your pancreas, and your pancreas is supposed to release digestive enzymes. So if that's clogged and your body's not releasing those enzymes, your body can't absorb the fat and the nutrients it needs to survive. So most people who have CF, before they eat anything with fat, they're taking pills. So you can add 30 more pills to the day for some of those individuals. And even though the girls, their pancreas works, they've struggled with some low fat soluble vitamin levels. So they have to take special vitamins to compensate for that shortage that they have. And then this last pill, that little pink pill, has anybody here ever had azithromycin or taken a Z-Pak before? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common stuff. And this is a recent addition to AJ's routine. And this was because no matter what we did, we could not get AJ to gain weight. Like, this girl will eat you out of house and home, but we still could not get her to gain weight. And it turns out that even when she's not sick, even when she doesn't have the flu or bronchitis or pneumonia, she is working harder just to breathe. She's working 2 to 4 times harder with every single breath she takes than those of us who don't have CF. And that was causing her calorie burn to be too high. Like, we just could not compensate for it. So her team gave her azithromycin. She takes this 3 times a week. And what that does is that helps fight inflammation, making it easier for her to breathe and decreasing that caloric burn that she has. Even with that, this girl needs about 2,500 calories a day, which, yeah. And when you're trying to lose baby weight, this is not your friend. I'm just gonna let you know. So 2,500 calories a day. CFers, their calorie is high fat, high cal diet, and high salt. So like bacon is a godsend for them. It's like the perfect meal that you can give to somebody who has CF. We put butter in her ramen. We put mayonnaise or tartar sauce in everything she eats. Pop-Tarts, like those things have a lot of fat in them. I bet you didn't know that. So she literally eats whatever she wants, whenever she wants, and Chris and I try and buy food that helps her with that. So this is what a day in our life is like specific for cystic fibrosis, but this is just when they're healthy. So this is every day. I kind of call it our maintenance medication. And at the slightest inkling of increased mucus or a cold, or if we think they're starting to get sick, the girls have to do their treatments 4 times a day. So at 30 minutes each, 4 times a day, that's 2 hours each girl, or 4 hours a day that our girls can be sitting on the couch, not outside running around and not playing and actively fighting this disease. So this is one day, and if you take a look back and you want to look at what a year looks like, in 2017, our girls took over 8,000 pills and supplements. Chris and I had over $14,000 in out-of-pocket healthcare costs. The girls spent over 240 hours attached to the vest, and that's a low number because Carson, our baby, didn't get her vest till she was about 6 months old. We had 37 doctor's visits specific to cystic fibrosis, and AJ had 2 hospital admissions. So one of those hospital admissions that I wanted to really talk about most today. So like I mentioned earlier, people who have CF, they struggle with chronic constipation, and AJ is definitely one of those. And in October of last year, AJ was starting to have some really bad belly pain, and she wasn't eating. And we talked to her team, and it turns out she was severely constipated. So they said we can try and fix this with something that's called an at-home clean-out. And what that means is the girl who wants to eat 2,700 calories a day can't eat any food. She has to go on a clear liquid diet, and she has to drink a lot of Miralax until we're able to get everything flowing again. Chris and I were really lucky that both of our managers were really supportive, and we took half days because nobody wants to be around a hangry 3-year-old. So we thought it was best if the parents were the ones staying home with her. So I would stay home in the morning, Chris would go to work in the morning, then we would tap out. The second day I was at work, and Chris texted me, and he's like, Lauren, like AJ is just not acting like herself. She's really lethargic. I really don't think this is working. We talked to her team, and it turns out that AJ was severely constipated, and after about 2.5 days of not eating, 31 caps of Miralax, we had made 0 progress. Like we hadn't even made a dent. So we decided that being admitted to Children's was probably the best thing to do and to do something a little bit more aggressive. So I came home from work, Chris had already started to pack the bag. We made arrangements for Carson and for Brody, our 2 other children, to have people watching them. Chris and I took turns eating because if she was going to be hangry, we did not need to be hangry as well, and we didn't want her to see us eating. So by the time we packed the car, drove down to Children's, got checked into admissions, and got transported to our room, it was really late. It was about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And this was just the start. Before we could even really start working on what we needed to do, AJ was going to have 2 procedures. And all she wanted to do was go to sleep and eat 6 Skyline hot dogs. So she kept saying, I just want Skyline, I want to sleep. But before we could do that, AJ was going to have 2 procedures done. And the main procedure that's specific for a clean out for people who have CF when they go to the hospital, it's through an NG tube. So NG tubes are used for a lot of reasons, but what AJ needed it for was to deliver something called Nulidol or Go-Lidol. And if anyone's ever had a colonoscopy, or if you know anybody who's ever had a colonoscopy, it's something very similar to what you took then. Adults usually need about a liter, a couple liters. They knew AJ was going to need it by the gallon. So trying to have her take that by mouth was just nearly impossible. And so an NG tube is really the way for the doctors to get that medication in her. And it goes up through your nose, down through your mouth, and into your belly to administer medication 24/7. But before we could do this, she needed to have an IV. We need to check her blood work, and it's just pretty routine. And 2 nurses walked in, which was different. Usually it's just one. And usually when you get an IV for children, they put a splint under your arm, because your natural reaction when you get an IV is that you want to recoil back. So the nurse came in, and I didn't realize she didn't put the splint on, but she did open up all of the other materials it was going to need and put it on the bed. So that way when she got the needle in, she could quickly get everything taped down. So she goes to prick AJ, I'm sitting behind her and I'm holding her down, and of course AJ recoils. And then I'm trying to hold her arm straight, and the nurse starts digging around trying to actually get the needle into where it should go. Blood literally starts spurting everywhere. It gets all over the place. AJ's tired, she's hungry. Who was touching her, she starts to get really scared, and then she starts kicking because she's screaming. And so all of those clean materials that the nurse had set on the bed are now on the floor. So even when they do get that needle in there, we have nothing to tape it down with. So I'm trying to keep her as still as possible. Chris and the other nurse are like flailing around trying to find new materials to get it all ready. And I'm honestly not sure what happened, but somehow the nurses changed, and the other nurse gets it put in there and gets it taped down. They send the blood work off, and it turns out AJ was severely dehydrated, and she needed to have some things added to her saline drip. They actually come and clean up all the blood, change the sheets, because AJ was really rattled. I mean, she's hungry, she's tired. I don't like to see my blood either. So she was really shook up, and that was before we even did what I was most concerned about, which was the NG tube. So we get a different nurse to come in and do the NG tube. I might have given her like the 5th degree before she did this. But I was really nervous. And I think if anybody out there is a parent and you've ever had to give your children a shot, or they've got an immunization, or you've had to give them ibuprofen or an antibiotic, or they've had stitches, when your child doesn't understand why they're getting hurt and you have to be the one holding them down, it kind of kills a little piece of your heart. So when you're holding your child down, you're like, Mommy, why are you letting them hurt me? Even though you know it's good for them, it's really hard. And that's what was going on with the NG tube. I had to wrap my leg around AJ's leg so she couldn't kick. I had to hold her arms down like this so she wouldn't pull the tube out. And with my free hand, I had to hold her forehead back so the nurse could get the tube up through her nose. Chris was standing by with some apple juice because the mechanism to get the tube from your throat and into your stomach was to actually swallow. And AJ was screaming the whole time, and she didn't understand what was going on. But honestly, the NG tube admission was much easier, and we were actually able to get it down, and it was less traumatic than the IV. So we finally got it done. It's late at night. It's 11:30 at night. We're all exhausted, and I was just emotionally spent. And this was probably one of the worst nights of my life, if not the worst. And that might sound surprising, because she wasn't on her deathbed. She wasn't, we weren't worried about her not walking out of there. But when I left the room to kind of get some air, I realized that I was upset because I had realized all the treatments we do, all the medications we do, and all the hard work we put into keeping our girls healthy, that cystic fibrosis was still progressing within her body. And that was a very harsh realization for a mother, to know that no matter what you do, the disease is winning. And just like any mother and any woman, I thought chocolate ice cream would help me feel better. So I walked into the room. There's like a little room for parents with pop and ice cream, and I pulled out the little chocolate ice cream, and I was eating it. And I actually remember seeing my tears fall into my ice cream. I remember thinking, like, man, I'm literally crying in my ice cream. Like, oh my God, I've had better days. So I put the ice cream down, and I walked back to AJ's hospital room, and I tried to pull myself together, but I wasn't fooling her. I think she could kind of tell that I was a bit of a disaster. But I opened the door, I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she smiled, and she said, Mommy, I missed you, come snuggle. And that was really where I have learned a heck of a lot about resilience. And in fact, if you look at any picture or any video from this hospital stay, which I don't really like talking about, to be honest, she is laughing, she is giggling, she is smiling. These videos are taken, she hasn't eaten in 4 days. And she's just having a great time, and she's making the best out of a really crappy situation. Get it? Because it was poop. Okay. She was making the best out of the situation, and I looked at there and I realized resiliency is a choice. You can, we're faced with choices every single day, and you can choose to let something make you better, or you can choose to let something make you bitter. I also have learned that you cannot expect any human or any person to be resilient 100% of the time. We're not Wonder Woman, we're not Superman, you can't do it. But the choice that we can make is to surround ourselves with resilient people. When I was down and when I was sad, AJ smiled at me and she lifted me up. You can ask my husband, there are plenty of times when I choose not to be resilient and he lifts me up, and vice versa. And I've realized that our team and our family as a whole, we're a pretty resilient bunch. And that's because we do it as a team. So my question is, do we do that for each other here at work? Do we lift each other up at work? And I know I'm sitting here talking about cystic fibrosis in front of a lot of people, but I didn't always want to tell people about this. For some reason, I really wanted to keep this part of my life separate from work. And I can't even really articulate why, but it just was something I didn't want to share. But after this admission, the nurses gave AJ this NG tube to take home, and this is like her favorite toy. I am not even kidding. There's plenty of times Chris and I have gotten fake tubes in her nose. She has taped this to her doll's cheek. If she meets a new friend, she's like, I've had a tube in my nose to get the poo-poo out of my tum-tum. And I'm like, why are you telling them this? She just owns it. And it just amazes me that it never took her over, right? She just owned it. And I'm like, well, if my 3-year-old can do that, I think a 30-something-year-old person could just be honest. And the next time I have to change a meeting because I need to go to the children's, I'm just gonna be honest. And what I have learned through that is just outstanding. I have learned that people I work with, they know how much NG tubes suck, because their daughter was born with a congenital heart defect and they had to be the ones who actually put the NG tube in. I've learned that when I had to cancel a meeting, it's okay because my son has autism and I completely understand having to work around that schedule. It can be really hard, but it's not a big deal. I've learned that people understand why you're in the car on the phone driving from appointments because their parents have dementia right now and they're trying to figure out where they should go, if they should be in the hospital or if they should be in a nursing home. I have learned that people who are on the phone with kids cry in the background because they've got 4 kids, and you know what? It's really hard sometimes when you have 4 kids and you're working and you're both working parents. I've learned that every single person in this room, in this company, and in this world has something. Everybody has something. And when you open up and when you're compassionate to each other, amazing things happen. And I understand it's not fair. It's not fair that my girls have a terminal disease. It's not fair that their life expectancy is the 40s. And it's not fair that they take more pills than most 80-year-olds. I understand that feeling of it's not fair. But does that mean that my girls throw a fit every single time they do their treatment? And does that mean that they just give up on the day because they had to take their ooey medicine today? Does that mean that they just give up and they just are upset all the time? And no, it's not. So when was the last time we all looked at the stock price and our day was literally ruined? And when was the last time somebody said something in a meeting and it pissed you off so much that you were still fuming when you pulled into your driveway? And like 50 minutes ago when Skype inevitably didn't work, who was really upset in the meeting, and the whole meeting just kind of went sideways for at least 15 minutes. And I think when was the last time we all realized that our reaction to all of these things that happen, it not only impacts us, but impacts everyone around us. I think we all want a culture of resiliency. I think we all want to create a culture that is strong. But culture is not owned by HR, it's not owned just by your manager, and it's not David Joyce. It's you and me and everybody that we work with. So what kind of a culture are we creating every single day? I think we all want a resilient culture, and I wish I could tell you I know exactly how to do it. I think I'd be making a lot of money if I knew the solution for resiliency. But what I have learned through AJ and this journey with cystic fibrosis and everything the past year is that compassion is a really great place to start. Thank you.